Okay, so just a quick video about UVs and UV offsets and tiling. So here I've just got an example. This is just from the starter content. It's a 400 by 400 meter wall from the architectural section. So my starter content, it's just this one here. So the UVs all have been set up for this really square. So when we drag a texture onto this, it'll be perfectly aligned to this. Okay. This isn't always the case though. So if I have an example of this wall, let me just drag this on, just drag this across. So what I'm going to do to this is I'm going to scale it. So let's go into the scale tool, let's scale that out. So we start to have this issue where our wall is no longer square. I'm just going to just go in here and set this by 1 snapping. So then I'm just doing it double the length. So rather than being 400 across now, it's 800 across. And we get this issue where it's now stretching out. So what I would have to do is perhaps make another texture for this that was tiling in the right way. But we don't have to do that. What we can do is set up a texture where we can just parameterize it and play around with it more. So I've got this texture here. I'll just bring down. In fact, I'll just bring here, just to the side. So I've set a couple of parameters on this. I've got my U tiling and V tiling, U offset and V offset. So let's just look at what this will be. I'm just going to reset these to what they were. So ignoring this wall here, because this will change as well, what I can do is I can go in and we can start playing around with this. So my U tiling is a horizontal tiling. My V tiling is a vertical tiling. So if we have something like this where these are elongated, it's twice as long. If I just go in and set this to be a value of 2, then we're going to get them perfectly square again, okay? Because we're maintaining the aspect ratio of this object. Or if we've not done something as precise as just stretching it out by twice the amount, I can just go in here and we can just change this value on the fly as well. So we can just stretch this out as we want to stretch this out. Okay, so if we want to stretch these out and elongate them, we can do them the other way. So that's the U offset, just about 2, and then the U tiling and then the V tiling. So we can stretch that the other way as well. So we can maintain the aspect ratio by playing around with these values. We don't have to create another set of textures. The other thing is sometimes you may want to move the UVs around or the texture around on the object. So this is what this U offset and V offset do. So again, U is a horizontal, V is a vertical. I can just go in here and we can start moving these around horizontally and vertically. So if you want to place something exactly next to another texture, but they're on 2 separate objects, we can play around with these and we're able to do that. Again, let me just reset these. Just click in here. We're back to where we were. So let's look at how we create this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start out with a texture that's already made. So I'm going to go into my materials. I've got one here. There's just a base set of floor tiles. So if I drag that on, that has no functionality. It's just a normal set of tiles. What I'll do is I will right click and I'll duplicate this. So this isn't about making materials. This is about the actual manipulation of the UVs. So I'll call this floor tiles tut. And let's just double click on this. And just bring this out. So I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'm going to start from scratch on this. So this is how it would be as a bog standard texture. Let me just save this. Let's just drag this one on now. Okay, so that's kind of what it looks like. And I have no ability to be able to change this on this material. What I can do though is I can go into these individually. And we can go in and on this constant coordinate we can change this value. So just drag this up here. So if I set that to something like 2, we're actually stretching that out twice. So if I was to save that, just go into this. You can see we've actually changed the size of it. Now it's not done it on all the other maps, so this is still showing the normal map under here. It's only done it on the albedo right now, or the base color. So we would also have to go into these ones individually and change these as well. But a couple of things with this, one of these problems is that it's doing it just the ratios remain the same. I'm changing the U and V by the same amount. I'm not able to change them both individually. And you would have to bring it into all of these as well, which can be quite a pain to do. So let's set that back to 0. Let's get back to where we were. Okay. So first of all, let's look at actually manipulating the tiling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to add in a texture coordinate. So type in texture coord, we'll get this texture coordinate value there. Now this will actually give us this U and V tiling separated now. So I could plug this in here, and we could plug this into all of these. It plugs into my normal map. Okay. And we could go in and change this now. So let's say we change that by 2. Oh, let's do something more extreme, 10. You can now see that we've changed that. In fact, let me switch onto this. You can see now that we've changed that tiling there. Similarly, I can do it on the V tiling as well. So we're changing the tiling there. Okay. But what we can't do is we can't actually access this outside the material editor. So this would be the same, and then what we'd have to do is create a duplicate of this texture and change these parameters in here as well. We need a better way to work with this. So let's just set these back to their defaults of 1. Back to where we were. Okay. Just a note about this, by the way, if you set this to 0, you will break the UVs. And you won't get any texture at all. So just be careful about that. They have to be over a value of 0. So we need a better way to work with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by a value. So let's press M on the keyboard to get our multiply node. Some of these have shortcuts, so M, click on the left click on screen, you get this multiply node. Just going to drag out this pin and plug this back into here, so we can reroute this by control, dragging on this, and I can plug that into there. So it's a quicker way rather than having to delete that and replug this into all of these. And I'm going to plug this into here. So we're going to multiply this by a value. So initially what I'm going to do is make a 1 constant. So press 1 on the keyboard, left click. Let's set this to a value of 1 again. And let's plug this in. Okay. So we've got exactly the same there. We've not changed anything. But if I now go in and change this value, let's set this to, say, 10 again. There we're tiling that. Okay. But again, we have this issue that we're only tiling both of them together. I can't change the U and V separately. So let's just set this back to 1. Essentially what I want to do here is 2 values. So I'm going to do another 1 constant. Just click there. Again, just make sure I set this to something like 1 to have no change. We need to be able to plug both of these values in to one slot. So I have 2 values. I have 1 thing in this. Okay. So I need to be able to add these 2 together. There is kind of another way you could do this. Let me just move these to one side. So we do have a 2 constant. So what our 2 constant gives us is these 2 values. So they are R and G for red and green, but we can use this for our U and V tiling as well. So again, let's set this to something like 10 by, say, 2 and plug this in. So we can do it that way. But again, what I need to be able to do is be able to see this outside of this area. To do that, we would parameterize this. So let me just try parameterizing this. So notice we have 2 values right now. To make something a parameter, we simply right click and we convert to parameter. And as soon as I do that, what it does is change this 2 constant into essentially a 4 constant, 1, 2, 3. In fact, on this one, we have 5 values. It's basically a texture sample. So we get an error. We have 5 outputs, or 1 output coming out of this. In here, we just have 1 input. So this is looking for 2 values going into it. Okay, so this doesn't work. So we need to do it, let me just get rid of this. We need to do it this way. So as I said, we have these two values right now. I need to plug them into this one value. So we use a special node called an append vector node. Click on that. So with this, I can plug these two in together. And now I can connect this up to here. Okay, so that's all working. And now what we can do is we can parameterize these individually. So let's right click, let's convert to parameter. I'm going to call this U tiling. Click on this one, right click, convert to a parameter. I'm going to call this V tiling. Okay, and let's save that. So let's go back in. This is our texture here. To be able to get to those parameters, we need to make a material instance. It won't work simply from this. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to click on create material instance. And I'm just going to call it floor tiles tut inst. If I drag this onto here now, again, nothing's changed because I've set all the default parameters to the normal parameters. If I double click on this now, I'm just going to drag this down. Let's go back to my thing. So what I've now got is U and V tiling parameters that I can access. So I click on these to activate them, and now we can change this value on the fly. So this serves two purposes. One, it's much quicker to do it here rather than having to do it and then save, as we have to do in our material all the time. And the second one is it allows us to have different versions of this material. So if I wanted to say a different tiling completely on this, I can go back to my base material or my master material, right click, create material instance, drag this onto here, and on this one now I can have a completely separate, let me just make sure I double click on this one. Again, let me just drag this down. I can have completely different tiling on this one. So I can use the same texture, but I can have it tiling over different objects and different surfaces in a completely unique way. So let me just reset that. Let's just close this for a second. Let's reset that. So that's kind of working. Okay, we can just parameterize this and then we can set it. So again, in this wall example now, where I set this twice the length, I can now go into the U tiling. Let's set that to 2, and that is fixed. And it's not affecting this other texture, so now they will match up. Okay, even though this wall is stretched out, I can have the same tiling over both objects. Really easy. So let's look at being able to offset this now. So I'll just save this. I'll just minimize this for a second. We'll open that back up in a little bit. Let's go back into this. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to move this around left and right, up and down, so I can change the position of our UVs or a texture on our UVs. And it's a similar kind of thing. So I'm just going to pull this all to one side, give myself some space. Instead of a multiply this time though, we use an add node. So I'm going to right click, type in add on there. And then again, I'm going to reroute this. So let's control, click and drag and push this into here. And let's push this, our multiply into this A channel. So I have a similar thing here. If I just put a 1 constant, or actually what we can do straight away is create what we call a scalar parameter. If I press S and left click, it straight away gives us a parameter without having to create a 1 constant and then change it into parameter. Let's call this offset. Let's just drag this in. And if I just save this, let's go back into this and let's go back into my, for this one here. You can see now I've got this offset, and this time what this is going to do is move this texture around. So you can see we can even go on a half tile halfway through. So if we need to manipulate this and move it, we can now do that. But obviously again, we don't have as much control. I can only do this on the U and V at the same time. So let's just reset this. Let's go back into our texture, and essentially it is the same as this. So what I can do is I'll create another scalar parameter. Let's call this V offset. Let's rename this U offset. I'll just steal this append node, so let's Control C, Control V. Let's drag this into here, then output into this add node. Okay. So again, let's just make a little bit of room here. Let's just drag this out there. And if we wanted, we could comment this out. So let's just go in, let's grab this. Let's press C. And let's say this is UV tiling. Let's grab these, press C. Let's call this UV offset. They're nice and neat. I could comment all this out as well, but I'll leave that for now. Let's click on save. So let's go back. You can see now I've got this option. So I've got my U offset, U tiling, V offset, V tiling. So now we've got complete control over this. I can move it left and right. And I can move it up and down. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing on this just to organize this a little better. I want my U offset and V offset to be together. So this is an optional thing to do this. I'm going to go into U tiling, and we've got this in our material expression. We've got this group. So I'm just going to create a group called UV tiling. If I click on my V tiling, I can now click on the drop down, and I've got that group. Let's do the same for this. Let's click on this. Let's create a group called UV offset. Click on my V offset, and I can click on my group and choose UV offset. And I can save. And what we're getting now is a little subcategory. So I have my offset with my U and V offsets, and my tiling with my U and V tiling. So we can organize this and split this up into different sections. So that's all there is to it really. Have a play around with that, and hopefully you find that useful.